Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolf, Chris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Welcome in to First Things First. I'm Sarah Cusack, filling in for Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter. That's Nick Wright. How you guys doing?
Good morning. Thank you for filling in once again. You did a great job yesterday.
We're still on our best to Jenna. I'm more worried about Jenna.
Jenna's under the weather. She has what I think a lot of New Yorkers have right now, which is the flu.
Which is very dangerous.
And so she's being very cautious, but we do wish our very best to her, but we appreciate you filling in.
Yes, a friend of the family.
Thanks for having me. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Well, let's get to it.
Yes.
We begin with Kirk Cousins, and he'll have no shortage of suitors on the free agent market, including the New York Jets. According to a report, the Jets are willing to pay whatever it takes to lure Cousins to New York. They have more than $70 million in cap space, more than enough to fit what should be a monster contract for the QB. CC, is Kirk Cousins worth such a huge contract?
You always get into these type of questions when other people have set the market. The question should be, it's not a bad question, but the question should be, how much is it worth to you when your team don't have a quarterback? Now, how much is that worth to you when you start the season and you got no hope of getting to the playoffs or potentially winning your division? All those things that fans have paid their hard-earned money for teams for a long time. So when you look at, and you mentioned it, $70 million in cap space available. So when you look at that, like, it's not as if they're up against the wall, like they're one or two players away. No, they need playmakers. And if you look at what kind of productivity they would have had last year, if they would have had someone like Kirk Cousins. So how much is it going to cost you to get someone like Kirk Cousins? Going to throw for 4,000 to 4,300 yards, going to throw from 25 to 32 touchdowns. Like, how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost you a lot of money. So absolutely, when you don't have a guy, like people say, well, we need a franchise guy. No, you don't. You need a competent. You need a guy that's in the top 20 quarterbacks in the league, and that's what you have in Kirk Cousins. You have the money, so you don't have an excuse for it. So someone like the Jets, absolutely. They should go out and they should remove everyone else from being a landing spot for Kirk Cousins and ensure themselves that they won't go through what they've been going through for a long time, not just last season, but get yourself a quarterback that then you can turn your concerns to other needs that you have on the team.
So the problem, and this is where you and I butt heads on this sometimes, is I understand that the idea of not having a quarterback is the worst situation in the NFL. So if you can get one, if you can go pay for one that you know is a proven starter, then it almost feels like money is no issue. What I have seen with teams, though, typically, is teams that do that because the guy is in the top 15, but pay him as if he's in the top 5. It hamstrings their ability to put the pieces around him that he needs to be successful. Now, with the Jets, it is an interesting situation because that $70 million is probably going to be closer to $85 million once they make a couple moves with Matt Forte and Muhammad Wilkerson. Mm-hmm. They have the second most cap space of any team in the league. Only the Browns have more. So either one of these teams, the Browns or the Jets, both of whom need a quarterback, Cousins has been more closely tied to the Jets than the Browns. People think the Browns are going to go through the draft. What they could do is something that I have encouraged teams to do for quite some time, and I think it would make sense, and it might meet Chris and I in the middle, which is you can give him his 5 years, $150 million, which is what he's probably going to get. But instead of doing what you see Joe Flacco's contract do, Drew Brees' old contract do, almost every quarterback's old contract do, which is slowly escalate as time goes on against the cap, you could put $60 million against the cap in year one. So instead of, if just for the math, the way it would normally work, if you did 5 years, 150, it's an average of $30 million a year. Over those 5 years, it would probably be a cap hit of 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. In those last 2 years, you're screwed. If you do $60 million in year one and then only have $90 million to spread out over those final 4, then you can maybe put the more pieces around him and you have the cap space to do it. That would be the instance where I would be okay with giving Kirk Cousins this type of money.
Well, this is the thing. He's going to get the money. Now, how you want to stack it up, no, we've not seen a team to do that, Nick's theory. So I don't think the Jets are going to do it, and I don't think that people try to say maybe if it was Aaron Rodgers, I might do something like that as far as reverse the cap. But if you look at the way the cap is growing, if you look at the percentages that he's going to get, if you give him a contract that only goes up incrementally a small amount, then it's going to still be the same percentage as far as the cap grows into the future.
But but it won't be because the cap's not going to double in 5 years. And the way they do these things.
Yeah, but you don't have to have the contract where it jumps up drastically. It can be a normal churn. Like, it doesn't have to be drastic.
The way we've seen most quarterbacks in the past is the first few years are very low, and then it gets very expensive, which is why they restructure. Now, we also haven't seen this contract typically for a guy who's not with his own team. Usually these contracts are, you want to keep Matt Stafford. You want to keep Joe Flacco. You want to keep Drew Brees, right? Garoppolo was kind of one of the first guys, and now we're seeing Cousins, where it's essentially a new team that would be paying him.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's worth the money. I asked the question again. How much is it worth to you when your team, you start the season in after Labor Day and you got no chance? So if you have the money, you're better off going out and get you a quarterback. Now, Nick is against giving guys the big contract because what it does to the team. But what is business like without one? So you need a quarterback.
So it's worth it to the Jets. But when it comes to Kirk Cousins, who's the best fit for him as a quarterback?
I don't really think there is a better fit. I think that, when Kirk Cousins, he's in the position right now, he wants to capitalize on the security. So will he take a team that's like the Jets that are a number of players away compared to going places that are a little more ready? Denver not as ready as Minnesota. Minnesota probably won't be able to get him the money. So the fit is, what does he want to accomplish, all right? Washington didn't want to give him the security. So the number one thing he wants to do is security. Now, if he looks outside the box and say, maybe I'm willing to take less, then there's some other teams that would fit him, like Minnesota. Denver is a good fit for him because they need a quarterback.
It would be concerning to me if I were any of these teams that Washington didn't want to keep him. Like, that to me is the first warning sign. The second warning sign is that over the last 3 years, each year, his win total has gone down. His quarterback rating has gone down. His completion percentage has gone down, and his interceptions have gone up. Like, over the last 3 years, the worst year he had was this past year. Now,
what kind of season was he supposed to have when they got rid of 2,000-yard receivers? Pierre Garçon, they let go to San Francisco. Deshaun Jackson, they let go to Tampa Bay. So was he supposed to improve? I mean, because he had amazing numbers. You get rid of 2,000-yard receivers, you go into free agency, you make a plunge, and you get Terrell Pryor from Cleveland, and he only catches 20 passes for you. So Kirk Cousins is getting the backlash for that.
Well, that gets us back to the point that our friend Eric Mangini makes, which is I understand what you're saying, but when you are going to be paid what he's going to be paid.
That has nothing to do with it because they've set the market. It's got, like, people, because it's the quarterback position, it's going to be the most highest paid. All right? It's just like a left tackle. You cannot play the game without him. So you're going to have to pay the premium. So it's not a matter of what's it worth. Like, what will the market bear?
Well, here's why, and you and I just have a fundamental disagreement on that, and that's fine. But the reason that I think the money does matter is because unless you are going to do what I'm saying and front load the contract, or unless the Browns or Jets are going to sign him when they do have this enormous amount of cap space, you are not going to be able to go get. There's a reason Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson were not retained. It was because of the money they had to attribute to Kirk Cousins last year. Like, that's a real thing. Now, to answer your question, what team that I think would make the most sense, I think the Browns and Jets actually have similar offensive talent. There's so much less pressure and less of pressure is probably the wrong word, less of a spotlight and less of an expectation to win immediately in Cleveland than in New York. I think the Browns could make a lot of sense. Now, we haven't seen a high-priced free agent pick the Browns in quite some time.
Is Cousins a guy who can handle spotlight and pressure, do you believe?
This every quarterback. There is no spot. I mean, we thought Jacksonville, they weren't. Look at what they do for the Blake Bortles. Every spot in the NFL, if you're a starting quarterback, there's going to be heat. It don't matter if you're in Cleveland, Denver, Minnesota, New York. They all have pressure, and there's more pressure on the franchise and the coaching staff when you don't have one. So how much are you willing to pay to start the season and say you got no hope? All right, so if that costs $30 million, I'm willing to give that guy the $30 million because at least I start the season with a chance.
I mean, and that's what's going to happen, by the way. Like the Jets will be thrilled if they sign him. The Browns will be thrilled if they sign him. Well, hold on. Be fair. The only way to be right on this, if we're going to say someone's going to be right or wrong, is to see if they are happy with him once the contract is going. Now, we all know he's going to get paid.
Joe Flacco got paid, right?
And I guarantee the Ravens wish they hadn't done that. But it don't matter.
He got paid, though.
Right. We all agree.
It's not a matter of they going to be happy. It's what does it take? What's the price of doing business? And this is the price. The Jets want to be in the game, all right? Pay the quarterback. If the Browns, if they want to get in the game, pay the quarterback, all right? Because those who don't have them, we know what the result is, all right? So Baltimore, Flacco won them a Super Bowl, which warranted him the big contract. These other teams, when you have cap space, San Francisco, go out and get your guy, all right? If you believe in them, you have to lay the money on the wood to be able to get the guy.
Moving on to the NFL draft. Baker Mayfield led one of the greatest offenses in college football history. However, his lack of height and off-the-field issues have some NFL execs concerned. Both these knocks have drawn comparisons between Mayfield and Johnny Manziel. Mayfield spoke about it. Take a listen.
We're two completely different people. I've always had love for the game. I've always been a team-oriented guy. Not saying that Johnny wasn't, but I've quickly earned the respect of my teammates because of how I worked. You know, I wasn't given the natural talent that Johnny had, and because he's talent, and there's a reason he got taken in the first round. Amazing player, and so we're just not the same mentally, just wired differently. I didn't want to be portrayed as the villain or somebody like that. I feel like I make a lot of people happy. I do good things within my community. And not trying to say those cover up any mistakes that I've made, but there's always a learning curve when you're growing up.
CC, is it fair to compare Mayfield to Manziel?
No, it's never fair. It's never fair that you have to, based on whatever that your stats are on and off the field, like that you would have to have them compared to someone that, especially someone who hadn't been successful. Now, it's different when they make these comparisons to people who are successful. But when they pick out someone and they're like, man, this guy wasn't good, because we know the end result. So, of course, it's not fair. You know, are there going to be people that overcome the obstacles? Yes, but to compare him to someone, and it's not fair for the most part because what we recently have found out, Johnny Manziel, he told us that he's been diagnosed with bipolar. So now to have Baker Mayfield, his whole career is in front of him. He has not shown us any signs of that Johnny has. So given all the information that I know about Johnny, I'd be like, absolutely no, it's not fair to compare Baker. All right, let's just look on the football field, like what he's done. Not last season, but in the last 3 seasons, 119 touchdowns, only 21 interceptions. I mean, that's amazing. A top 5 Heisman Trophy finish. 5 years in a row. The wins that he had at Oklahoma, not against opposition, just top ranked, but what he did on the road when he took Oklahoma on the road, the teams he beat by carrying that football team and that program on its back. So, I mean, I think that he's going to be an outstanding player. I had the opportunity to spend some time with him before the Oklahoma Ohio State game this year. Very, very impressed of what he looks like as a football player, how he carries himself. He has the type of swagger and the type of leadership that you know. How do you know a leader? Because there's a bunch of guys behind him following him, and just seeing him and how he commanded the attention of his teammates and what he went about and the things, not on camera, but the things he did as a leader and talking to the coaching staff. I have 100% belief that he's going to be a quality NFL quarterback. He will be a franchise quarterback for someone. So I'm looking forward to his NFL career. And it's definitely not fair to compare him to someone who could not have a career, not only because of his ability, because he couldn't manage the time off of it and just to socially being an NFL superstar.
Listen, of course it's not fair, but so much of what happens throughout the draft is not fair. Questioning a guy's dedication to a sport because he might also enjoy cooking classes is not fair. Questioning guys' IQ or their intellectual ability because of how they do or don't do on the Wonderlic test is not necessarily fair. There's a lot of stuff about the draft that is not fair. What I do understand is people trying to draw some comparison or draw something about, okay, who was Baker off the football field? because there are legitimate reasons to say, okay, these are actual red flags. Much like Johnny only got in trouble with the law once in college. Now, we found out Johnny's dad was worried that he had a drinking problem in college. That obviously proved out to be true. Johnny also, as Cece mentioned, had the bipolar disorder that he was trying to manage and unfortunately was not able to be successful in managing that. But if a GM says, okay, if a guy's going to be my quarterback and he makes a mistake and runs from the cops and gets arrested, I do need him to be on his best behavior moving forward because you have used your one free pass. And the crotch grabbing and the flag planting, while it doesn't really bother me, that is the type of behavior that tends to bother NFL scouts and GMs, especially when you know or should know you were already on notice. But if you can get past those things on the field, I don't think the Baker-Johnny comparisons work at all. I think the quarterback that's going to be a draft pick this year that plays most like Manziel is actually Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar is none of the off-the-field stuff, but a guy that can run, that can throw. Baker can run, but was not a dynamic, like, oh, my God, running threat the way Manziel was. Baker set in consecutive seasons the passing efficiency all-time record in college football. He had, 3 top 5 Heisman finishes. Like, he was an extraordinary player on the field. And so I do understand the off-the-field concerns with Baker. Whether they're fair or not, I get why they're there because we've seen them for other people. On the field, the only concern I'd have is his height. His height and the fact that he played in the Big 12 in that system, and there's not a lot of quarterbacks that have come out of that system, come out of that university, come out of that conference for that matter, and had successful professional careers.
Mayfield, obviously, with the demonstrative behavior, as you talked about on the field, but is there anything he could do at this point to convince, obviously he's speaking about it, but convince NFL executives, coaches, that he is a different type of personality?
All he can do is go through the process. When he went to the Senior Bowl, people were very impressed with him. He'll go through the interview process, the workout process, have his pro day, all those things. No, that's all he can do. Go to the combine. Just be upfront about it. Just address everything. Be honest, because they know all the information. They know all the answers to the questions. Because you know what? These will be questions not about football. Because you can't question his football ability. You can't question his ability to throw all over the field. You can question, can he take the ball under center, which he's working on already. But as a football player, there's not a lot of questions about him. Once you get those other questions resolved, and if he wasn't a quarterback, you wouldn't be worried about those. The only reason why you're worried about those is because he's a quarterback.
Cece, I've been very impressed, I don't know if that's the right word, but taken aback almost by how resolute you've been in your belief in him, really, since you saw him in that Ohio State game. You're not easily swayed by college players, I don't feel. I feel like you have a very high threshold for you to be impressed by a guy and for you to believe a guy can be a star in the next level. What are some of the things that you saw and you've seen from Baker that make you look past maybe some of the height issue that I know a lot of scouts don't like, that make you more, I don't want to say convinced, but more confident that he can be successful at the next level?
Right. I get concerned about height. Height is an issue in the NFL. But when a guy does not have a pure throwing motion, where if he throws the ball a little bit sidearm, because that even makes him shorter. If you look at the guys that we have that are 6-footish in the league, Drew Brees, right over the top throwing the ball. Russell Wilson, right over the top throwing the ball. And they're very good athletes. They use their athleticism to bide time, the same way that Baker Mayfield does. So we've seen this work. Is he going to be dedicated to doing the things that you need to do, being a student of the quarterback position? All those things we don't know. But to me, he's performed the way that you would want a quarterback to perform. Short throws, bubble screens, intermediate, throwing the ball deep, running the football, biding time, not turning the football over, like being a competent passer in the pocket, on the move. All those things he's done. In 3 seasons, he's been remarkable playing the position.
Let me ask one follow-up question about I've heard you talk about guys leaders and the guys that follow him. What have you seen that is the difference between a guy who does some of those histrionic things so people look at him, or does some of those things and his teammates rally behind him? Because I know you think he's more the latter than the former.
Right, and then also talking to the administrative staff that's around the football team. They tell you a lot of things because I'm not covering the game. I was just there as a fan trying to find out because I knew this moment would arise. Man, what are they saying about Baker Mayfield? So let me get some of the intel. Talking to the wide receiver coach, talking to the guy that does the quarterback, talking to the guy that just does their player development, the things he does. He is a born leader. It is the it factor. You can't put a word to it, but when you see it, you know what it is. It's like a beautiful horse. It's like a pitcher that throws the ball. Like, you don't know what it is as far as adjectives, but you do know when you see it.
It was a tough season for Eli Manning. The Giants went 3-13. He was benched for a game. As a result, the G-men have the number 2 pick and a chance to draft Eli's replacement. However, according to reports, there's a growing belief the Giants will pass on a quarterback in the first round. Nick, would it be crazy for the Giants not to draft a quarterback?
Well, it depends on what their objectives are. Like in life, we always need to say, what are you trying to achieve? And if you're the New York Giants and your number 1 objective is to erase the memory of last season, to get back into the playoff picture, to potentially get back into the championship picture, then draft Saquon Barkley. Then you could then have one of the very best wide receivers in the league to go along with one of the very best running backs in the league. I don't know that Saquon would be that, but we've seen over the last few years, rookie running backs can come in and immediately be top-flight running backs in the league. So if your objective is, let's make the playoffs as soon as possible, let's extend Eli's window as long as possible, then no, they wouldn't be crazy. It'd be the smart thing to do. But if Pat Shurmur and Dave Gettleman's objective is long-term and to have a plan post-Eli, when Eli obviously is entering the final few years of his career, then I would say you have to take advantage of something you hope to not have again anytime soon, which is a top 2 pick of the draft. Like, you hope that you're not drafting in the top 5 or the top 10 anytime soon. So this could be your opportunity to get the Eli heir apparent. So if they are thinking long-term, big picture, I definitely would take a quarterback. Doesn't mean I would trade Eli. Doesn't mean I'd cut Eli. I would maybe let him sit for a year behind Eli. But that's what I would do if I was worried about the next 5 to 10 years. But if you're just worried about the next 16 games, then yeah, I suppose Saquon's your guy.
Saquon Barkley, you believe he's going to be a star in the NFL?
I do.
Okay. Which quarterback then would you take with that pick that now, because you said Barkley is going to be a star, I need you to be able to tell me this quarterback's going to be a star. Which quarterback would you take with that pick?
I don't think he has to be a star quarterback. I think he has to be, maybe we should define star, like what we'd call a franchise quarterback.
No. Answer my question, because I want him to be a star, because it's New York City, and we know that Barkley is going to be a star. Like we qualify.
We're taking that as a given that Barkley's going to be a star. I got you. You know who my guy is, and it's a point of contention here. Josh Rosen.
It's not a point of contention. That's just your guy.
Josh Rosen.
Like, them guys look like I don't care nothing about them. Okay. Like, if they do well or not, it's not going to matter to me one bit.
So that's the answer.
Yeah, I believe he's going to struggle in pro football, especially if he comes to the East Coast. He's never played anywhere cold. All right? I believe it's more important to have the running game going forward with Eli over the next 3 or 4 years with Odell Beckham Jr., because there is no future beyond that. Gettleman, he just got fired in Carolina. All right? Pat Shurmur, he got fired at his other coaching job coaching the Browns. So you can't plan no long term. Like, what they've hired them for ownership is to get them turned around. As if they're close to being a playoff team. All right? They can't say they were a playoff team, but they were expecting to follow up last year with being in the playoffs 2 years in a row. They didn't get there, so now they have an overhaul. All right, I would go with the running back. I would use free agency to repair that offensive line, and the Giants will be right back in the playoff picture with double-digit wins. The quarterback and all that situation, that's another question for another day. Like, how can we get back in the playoffs? And I believe Barkley gives them that. He's a phenomenal, not only, forget runner between the tackles, but he has big play ability. And you don't get that in a lot of running backs. He is a ready-made receiver, a mismatch, like Le'Veon Bell, that you can put outside at the receiver position, and he can do business against a safety or against a linebacker. Special teams from day one. If they kick the ball off opening kickoff, he can return that, as I saw against Penn State versus Ohio State, and be an instant impact, for a franchise. So I believe he's a can't miss at the number 2. And if I'm the Giants, I draft him moving forward.
What then would the Giants' expectations be Or what would you say would be realistic then
well, this
for
is the Giants. The Giants have never won without a running game. So if we talk about getting back to winning, like global warming has not hit New York City, all right? It is February and it is still cold around here. Not the day today. It's going to be a beautiful day. But if they're the football Giants, they got to get back to that. That defense has to live up to the expectations for the money that they were paid, and they got to get back to running the football because that will be the best thing for Odell Beckham. Make them crowd the line of scrimmage. Make them stop you from running the football.
Here's what I know about just the drafts in general and the history of it. We can go through every single draft over the last 10 years. And with hindsight, with being able to look back on it, you know who the first pick of every single draft would be? The best quarterback that was in that draft. And if there were two good quarterbacks in that draft, you know who the second pick would be? The second best quarterback in that draft. If there is a good quarterback in the draft or two good quarterbacks, they are more valuable than any other player, no matter how good they are. No matter if they are the best running back. Like the Ezekiel Elliott draft, he's the best running back in football. But guess what? Carson Wentz would be the number one pick of that draft. Jared Goff would be the number two pick of that draft if you have the hindsight to go back and do it. And so if the Giants look at this and say there are two or one in the Browns pass on quarterbacks, I think you have to take that opportunity. Now, if they don't believe in the quarterbacks, you don't reach on it.
Well, there's another argument, too. We saw that what happened to the Cowboys. They got their quarterback. When they were missing their running back, what happened to them? They were marginal as far as a team. So you need a running back to be a big-time team in the National Football League. And I believe the Giants, they have their guy in Barkley.
With that, we're moving on to New England Patriots. We all remember seeing an emotional Malcolm Butler before the Super Bowl kicked off. Early reports where Belichick told Butler that he wasn't starting right before the game. However, Devin McCourty says the Patriots already knew this was a game plan. Nick, how surprised were you by McCourty's comments?
I mean, Cece, something isn't. What's it? Something stinks in the state of Denmark. Something isn't right here. Because, first of all, we have now heard it was decided right after the anthem. Now we're hearing, no, they knew all along. But the guy's crying during the anthem. So, is it possible, Devin McCourty, that the captains, of which he is one of them, knew this was happening, but the rest of the roster didn't, and McCourty's mistaken? Maybe. Is it possible that McCourty, who is drafted by the Patriots, a lifelong Patriot, probably going to, is definitely going to continue with the Patriots?
They signed him to a big-term contract after the 2015 season.
Right, that he is maybe trying to clean this up for his coach a little bit, maybe. But what to me, Malcolm Butler got some news shortly before the game, whether that was you're not playing at all, whether it was you're not starting, whatever it was, that affected him. And what we also know is whether they had the game plan all along, I guarantee you part of the game plan wasn't Nick Foles playing the best football game of his life en route to Super Bowl MVP. And the game plan was to use a roster spot on Malcolm Butler, so you still could have put him in the football game. So something still, to me, doesn't sit right with me here, CC.
They're not telling the full truth, and they're not going to tell the truth. This is New England. Like, let's realize what's going on here. Devin McCourty, what is he? He's one of Bill Belichick's lieutenants. So he's trying to fix up the horse of manure that was left by them, and their fans saying, this guy played 98% of the snaps. This guy typically guards the best receiver. Now, why didn't he play any snaps? This is my puzzling question. With the 25 to 30 special team snaps, so the guy who was the starter, so he wasn't even good enough to play on any of the special teams? Like he couldn't run down on the kickoff? So you made an example of this guy who's one of your marquee players by, you know what, I'm going to make you sit. Because I know there's guys on special teams that Malcolm Butler, the assignment to do whatever they were doing, I know Malcolm Butler is better at that than them. So this is McCourty trying to clean up for the coach, and he's the only person that said something since the Super Bowl. I wonder why. Because the optics of it are not very good. And if we're wrong, then all the pool reporters that were following the team the week of the Super Bowl, why wasn't it pointed out in practice that Malcolm Butler, he's not a starter? Oh, Malcolm Butler, he's not a part of nickel. Oh, Malcolm Butler is not part of dime. And the reason why I call BS on Devin McCourty is because your nickelback, all right? And Patrick Chung, your safety, and the other special teams player that they put in at dime, they stunk. Okay, so for you trying to make an excuse for Malcolm Butler not playing but one snap in the Super Bowl, like, stop that, man. You need to stop that, all right? And if you were doing something, you need to speak up for your teammates. Talk about how a good teammate he was, all right? Don't talk about you knew the week before, because Malcolm Butler, he didn't know.
And in fairness, he did talk about him being a good teammate.
Oh, that's what he should have stayed on.
Okay, I just want to make sure people
don't be making excuses like, oh, this wasn't news. Oh, it was news to somebody.
And there is one other element to this, which is, and I can only say this so many times, someone can be the best ever at what they did, but it doesn't mean they are flawless. I think Bill Belichick's the best football coach I've ever seen, but it doesn't mean he's flawless. The defensive backfield, which is something as a defensive-minded coach you would think he has an eye for, is something the Patriots have struggled and struggled and struggled through the draft. Since 2011, I was going to tell you names of guys they spent top 95 picks on, first, second, or third round picks on. Razai Dowling, Tavon Wilson, Duron Harmon, Logan Ryan, Jordan Richards, Cyrus Jones. That is 6 guys from the 11 draft to the 16 draft, none of them difference makers for this team.
Nope.
Now, the corners who are on this, the defensive backs who are difference makers on this team, other than Malcolm Butler that they drafted, Patrick Chung, who left and came back, and Devin McCourty. That's from 2009 and 2010. They keep trying to draft this position. Belichick's in charge of the draft. They keep missing on guys. And then the Super Bowl, you don't play one of your most talented players.
And he coaches the position. So when you take credit for what they do, also take the blame. During the regular season, New England, great downfield, right? 60 passes of more than 20 yards, one of the most in the National Football League. So Bill Belichick, you don't want to say for benching Malcolm, you don't want to take credit, but take credit for them being poor defensively, not only this year, but for several years they struggled with it.
Welcome back to First Things First. On Sunday, Austin Dillon won the 60th running of the Daytona 500. He took the checkered flag after a dramatic final lap. And guess what? He is with us now,
Good
Austin.
to see you,
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much for joining the show.
Welcome
We
to First Things
appreciate it.
First.
This is great. I'm a huge sports fan, so to be on here with you guys, Hall of Famer, man, it's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's an honor for us.
You see that, Nick? He comes in with some respect. You see that?
Yeah, he just met you today.
Young man.
And that's how I was the first time I met you, too.
Young man.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to see you, Austin.
Austin, we are thrilled to have you. What was it like winning your first Daytona 500?
It was so special, having all my family there. For my grandfather, he gave me my career, and to be able to give him a trophy back like this, it feels really great.
And people maybe don't know who your grandfather is.
Yeah, my grandfather, Richard Childress, car owner for Dale Earnhardt. He went into Hall of Fame in NASCAR a couple years back, and he's been around NASCAR, just legendary, and it's been very special to be able to drive his number in the 3-car, and had a lot of fun so far. And Daytona 500, man, it was awesome.
So if people just, saw the last half hour of the race, it was crazy. And it was, last year, I think the Daytona went to 5, what they called overtimes. This year we had 1. I'm not talking about at the very end, but the wreck before the last wreck, with the one that ended up putting you guys in caution, I think with 8 laps to go. What is, as a driver, are you constantly aware, like, okay, I've got to do what I've got to do, but also, if this wreck comes, I just have to avoid it, or are you not even thinking about that part of it?
So Daytona is like a chess match. There's a lot going on throughout that race, and the biggest thing, you can't win unless you're there at the end. You got to be there on the last lap. So my strategy throughout the race, because we were in a backup car, we started in the back, and I wanted to make it through all the wrecks and be there at the end. We ended up finishing 9th in the second stage. We go back on racing. The wreck happens. Actually, with about 11 to go, we were sitting in 13th away from the pack. And I was thinking, oh, no, our race is over. I got this clean car to race with, and I can't get to the pack. Caution comes out. We make some good strategy running up through there. The next wreck, like you're talking about, where we end up 4th. I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, we're sitting here 4th with a green-white checker to go. I'm just thinking it's going to be a good Daytona 500 no matter what. And then the opportunity comes with my buddy Bubba, who gives me a huge push down the backstretch. We use it and go to victory lane.
What does it mean to you to win in the number 3 car 20 years after Dale Earnhardt's victory?
We talked about it leading up to the race. It was a storyline, and I kind of ran with it. I was like, how special would it be to get the 3 back in victory lane 20 years later? And just dreaming about this moment and how it all comes together. Daytona, I talked about it also. It's a historical place that always has a storyline. And leaving there with the win, 20 years difference, it's very cool.
And 20 years ago, you were there at the finish line with what you call him, Pop-Pop?
Yeah, that's
Pop-Pop there. And so you've grown up around racing. historic race as far as the finish, you winning 20 years later. But also you mentioned Bubba Wallace, the first African-American on the regular NASCAR top-level circuit driver since 1971. He finished in a photo finish second. What does that mean? Not only for you winning in the history just of your family around racing, but Bubba winning, what it means for racing.
Well, I think it's just great for our sport. I actually grew up racing with Darrell, and we go racing Bandoleros, Legends cars, came up through the ranks kind of racing against each other. And Darrell's done a lot to get to this point.
Darrell is Bubba?
Yeah, Bubba,
Yes.
Darrell
Okay,
Wallace,
yes.
yeah. So Bubba, and actually I put him, I have motorsports, Austin Dillon Motorsports, put him in a truck last year, and he won his first truck, well, not his first truck race, he run a couple, but he had won there, and it kind of came full circle, getting him that truck deal to now he's at Petty Motorsports and running the 43 full time, and then he pushes me to victory lane at Daytona. It's really cool, the connection there. But for our sport, it's amazing, and he's doing a great job.
Prior to, when was the first moment you thought you could win, when you got the push, or did it happen before that? When, because you mentioned you're in 13th, you're like, but was it the green-white checker that you realized, oh, we're going to be right there? When did you first think you could win the race?
Well, I tell you, I knew coming off of turn 2 that we were going to have a run. We were side drafting pretty hard with the 11, and when the 43 got to my back bumper, I knew that was going to be it. If we're going to make a move, it was there. And got clear of the 11 and had a huge run. The 10 car of Eric Almirola, he put a block, and we just had too much momentum. It turned him. Ended up getting back to the start-finish line first. And it's just when that's going through your head, I'm sure like for running the touchdown for you, when it's going through your head, things are happening so fast, you're just trying to get there. And looking back, I mean, it's pretty cool how it happened.
In winning this championship, a lot of crazy things. Chris Long, he talked about getting a tattoo of his defensive line coach. We have other people, Philadelphia Eagles fans, are getting tattoo of the Philly special to play. You got a tattoo on your buttocks after. Now, let me know, man, how this went down.
All right, so I'm just hanging with my guys, and I actually already had a tattoo back there. And it was just a group of my boys. We call each other the Wolf Pack, right? Yeah. And so half of my team this year were already in the Wolf Pack, and they moved up to my team. It was kind of like the joining and changing of the guard of our team. And so after the race, we ended up going to the same tattoo parlor that we went a couple years back, and got a new tattoo of the Daytona 500 championship on it. So,
that's awesome.
It is. We know CC, when you sat down, told you, enjoy. This is your moment. This is your time. But what, as I'm sure you start to look ahead, are your goals for the rest of this season?
Well, we have a lot of goals. We set out to win more than one race. We wanted to win a couple, so you can't do any better than start the season off with a win. But my main goal for me is to become a NASCAR Cup champion. I've won 2 championships. I would be the first to win all 3. So that would be really cool.
So you'd be the first driver ever to win all 3 of the different series championships.
Yes, sir. I've won the Truck Series, I won the Xfinity, and now the opportunity is there to win the Cup Series.
And you also, there's 4 crown jewels in your sport, right? There's the Daytona, which everyone knows about, the Coca-Cola 600, which I think people know because it's the 600, the Brickyard, which is famous because of the Brickyard, and then Southern 500. You won the Coca-Cola last year, and you won the Daytona this year, so you're halfway there as well, right?
That's right. And the first 2 Cup wins I've got have been these crown jewel races. I just like to show up for the big ones.
That's amazing.
Nothing wrong with that.
The way it
I'll
should
take it.
It's like a lot like a guy you're a fan of, Carolina Panthers fan.
That's right.
There we go.
Yeah, Cam
I
Newton.
mean, you're
go.
on the Cam bandwagon. What do you see for Cam and the Carolina Panthers going forward? You see a championship?
I hope so, man. I went to the Super Bowl when they went out there and just dominated all the way getting there to Super Bowl, and it just didn't look right when we got there. So I'm looking forward to the new offensive coordinator, North Turner. I want to see what he brings to the offense. Christian McCaffrey, I'm a huge fan of him too. I just want to see how they can integrate him, get him the ball more. And it's a fun offense to watch once you get rolling. The steam's there. And Luke Kuechly, he texted me after the race. That was really cool. Just huge fan of all those guys. I try and stay in touch with them when I can.
You also have another fan. Earlier when you were coming in, we did the in bump. I gave you an item that brought back some memories from before the race. Can you share with fans what happened and how it was a magical moment even before you got in the car?
I actually got to talk to this fan last night. So the story goes, I'm at an autograph session, and the kid walks up, and he's got just a regular, like,
How
hat.
old is he?
He's probably 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
And he's just got a regular hat, no driver-affiliated hat. And I ended up handing him my hat and signed it. I said, now, look, I gave you a hat. I better be your driver, right? And he's like, yeah, you're my guy now. I'm like, cool. So the next day I walked through the garage, ended up seeing him, and he yells at me, and I come over there because I seen him with the hat. It was one of my my hats. And I was like, all right, cool. So I walk up to him, and he goes, I got something for you. And I was like, what is it? And he gave me a heads-up penny. And the story goes, Dale had a penny in his car 20 years ago. And so we stuck that penny in the car. It actually was in my Clash car. It's the race before the 500. And we ended up having to go back home, get the penny, pull it out of there, and put it in the 500 car. So we put a little extra work in to make sure we had it in the car for the 500.
Does that go to the Hall of Fame? Does that go to you? Do you still have it? What's the story? Where is that now?
So what you do when you win Daytona, the next day they put it in the Daytona Museum. The car goes in there.
Right.
And the penny's in the car, sitting there right now. You can go check it out at Daytona.
That's
unbelievable.
Awesome.
We
That's
so
awesome.
appreciate you being on here with us. Austin Dillon, Daytona 500 winner.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you so much. While LeBron has been excellent in year 15, the overwhelming story is where he'll be next season. According to Vegas, Cleveland is currently the favorite at 2-1, with the Rockets behind them at 7-2. The Lakers at 5-1 and Philly at 8-1. CC, where would LeBron have the best chance of winning going forward?
Woo. I'll start from the back. I'm concerned about the 76ers, even though I would have them on the list. And the reason why is I worry about Joel Embiid with the rules in the NBA. When you get into the playoffs, they are not favorable for a big guy, especially as far as getting fouls called at the end of games. The games are slowed down, so it's more of a half-court game in the playoffs than it is up and down. So I worry about that. And they don't have the shooters around LeBron that I like. The Lakers, I don't believe that the Lakers, because of the young players that they do have, I don't believe that they're good enough. I don't believe Ball, Ingram, I don't believe they're good enough for LeBron to go there, him and Paul George. I don't believe that's enough firepower. I don't believe they're better than Houston, San Antonio, and or Golden State. So the Rockets, I believe that they're real. I believe there will be interest on both sides, a great deal of interest. But the Cavs, because they hold the product, they have him there now. I like the assets which they got him at the trade. I like the commitment of Dan Gilbert committing to pay that astronomical luxury tax year in and year out to have a winner on the court. And these memories for the next third of the season into the playoffs, I believe they can have a strong influence on LeBron because he's from Ohio. He came back to Ohio, and they still have a chance to win a world title this year. So Cleveland should be the favorite.
So here's the thing. I almost can dismiss the Lakers in my mind. I think that it's the place he's least likely to go of the four we listed, and it's the place I think he would have the hardest time winning. Because as Chris mentioned, like LeBron plus Paul George, unless Brandon Ingram makes an enormous leap and Lonzo Ball makes a big leap, and they have some other key acquisitions that they would almost assuredly have to shed Luol Deng's contract in order to do, and nobody wants that contract. They can maybe stretch provision him, but the Lakers, to me, are a couple years away from being a couple years away. So that doesn't make a ton of sense for a guy who will be going into year 16. Philadelphia is, to me, the most intriguing. It is something Chris brought up months ago when people were really focused on the Lakers, and I was more focused on the Rockets. And the reason you mentioned Joel Embiid, I'm not trying to take too much from the All-Star game, and I understand it's an exhibition. But at the end of that game, when they tried to isolate Embiid defensively on guards and go at him, what I was seeing visions in my head of is, okay, hold on a second. If this guy does have that defensive ability out on the perimeter, and I talked to a league executive yesterday that when I brought up the All-Star game, the first name out of his mouth was Joel Embiid in those sequences, that if he does have that type of defensive ability, then the small ball stuff doesn't work. Because the whole idea of the small ball is you're five. You can't keep a five on the court to hurt us on the offensive end where he could just back down our guy. But because he can't guard on the defensive end. If Embiid can, then that is an intriguing team. The lack of shooting is problematic, but we have seen shooters, especially in their later years, tend to follow LeBron where he goes. Houston, Philly is a real thing to me. And I think Philly has the best chance of LeBron extending this window to 16, to 18, 19, if he wants to play to year 20 because of the youth. The only caveat I have with Houston is, while next year, CC, I think they'd be the best fit for him, Chris Paul, everyone's not going to age like LeBron is. And Chris Paul's an undersized guy. He will be going into year 15. How well will his game age, I think, is a real concern for LeBron moving forward.
Well, the thing, look, if he was to go to Houston, they have 3 ball handlers. So with Harden being the youngest, LeBron. He can take time off of Chris Paul handling the ball. So him and they can do that for a long time together. As far as the 76ers, I just worry about the post play. It's so hard. You don't get any advantage in the NBA. You covering it on a daily basis. You see that. Like, post play is not rewarded. Like, when you throw the ball into the post, man, you can bang that guy as much as you want. So the inability, that's why Daryl Morey and them, that's why they have the analytics. That's why they shoot the three, because of the lack of efficiency that you can have throwing the ball in and the changing in the rules. You know, if they were going to reward the guy for good in post play, good inside moves, like, then yes, I would look forward to that. But I believe the dark horse in this, you're talking about playing year 15, 16, 17, 18, San Antonio Spurs. Who does it better than Popovich? So for me, the team not on the list, I believe, is a real possibility. And I believe it's more real than Los Angeles, him going to San Antonio, because of the draw and the respect of the coach.
Nick, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on San Antonio, because as you mentioned, Greg Popovich is probably not a more respected coach in the league. But we know LeBron James's personality. Yep. We know how dominant he can be in an organization. How do you feel like those two would mesh together?
I think Pop's the one coach he would defer to. I think Pop's the only coach in the league that he would fully embrace as far as what you say we are going to do, as opposed to trying to be co-coach, as I think he's been. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think David Griffin, last week, I watched a number of interviews with him on NBA TV, and he said that's one of the things about LeBron that people get wrong. Like, as if he's always on the phone, he's always in the office, he's always hounding me about decisions. He said LeBron is not that way. Do we keep him abreast of some of the things that we do? He said, but that is something that people give LeBron, and it's not necessarily accurate.
Well, I think those are two separate things, because David Griffin's talking about from the GM's perspective as opposed to the coach's perspective. I believe, and I've heard the same thing, that LeBron is not the one trading players. LeBron is not the one saying, go bring in this guy. But as far as the offensive system you run, I think LeBron is the leading component of that. I think they're running LeBron's offensive system. Would he do something different in San Antonio? I think he would. I also think San Antonio, if they were to have a chance to get LeBron, I think they would, in short order, call New Orleans and say, Kawhi's not happy here. You guys are worried Anthony Davis isn't going to stay there. And a one-for-one trade there. And then Anthony Davis and LeBron in San Antonio is interesting. Now, Vegas doesn't think it's a possibility. Vegas says Detroit has a better chance of signing LeBron than the Spurs. And one last thing before we break. I didn't mention Cleveland. I think it is very simple for the Cavs. I think if the Cavs win the title, they keep LeBron. If they don't win the title, they do not. I don't think LeBron, even though Gilbert's spending the money, wants to sign a 4-year Supermax contract, giving all the power to Dan Gilbert. I think the only way he stays there is if they do win the championship this season. Hey, everybody, Nick Wright here, and thank you so much for listening to the First Things First podcast. But I wanted to tell you about another podcast at Fox Sports that we are so excited about, and that is Alexi Lalas's State of the Union podcast. That's right, U.S. soccer legend Alexi Lalas will be partnering up with Fox soccer guru and researcher extraordinaire David Moss to review the top storylines in soccer across the globe. Each week, Alexi will give his State of the Union on American soccer as it rebuilds for the future. Subscribe and listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to First Things First. We've got like a Hall of Fame table
Good
here.
to see you, Zeke.
All right.
How are you?
Joined by Isiah Thomas. Thanks for being. And you just got back from L.A.?
Just got back from L.A., but I'll tell you this. I watched the three-point shootout contest. Don't nobody shoot it better than you.
Oh.
Don't nobody shoot it. I mean, it's the real shooter here.
Wow.
The real shooter.
This is the thing. Zeke, I knew that. I had Nick so worked up yesterday because I just talked about one-on-one and everything.
Right.
I was going to get it down to some horse or pig or something because I knew she'd be able to handle that. But you messed up some money of
I'm
mine.
just curious why you're trying to put me in it. You're the one that had all these college scholarships. You're the one that followed Zeke around Indiana. Why aren't you playing? Why aren't you in it?
Because
you're a Hall of Famer.
You don't see sucker on your forehead?
Oh.
It's a sucker.
Get my money.
Thank you.
Not happening.
I knew he would go for it.
Isiah, what did you think? Is it new All-Star format? What did you think of it? How'd you think it went?
I thought it went great. And, you know, we call it the new All-Star format. But for us who have played pickup a lot, right? That's the old format, right? This is how we play. So when we go to court, it's like, I got you, and I thought it worked out great. I thought the game was exciting. I thought it was competitive. And I thought LeBron James did a good job in terms of setting the tone, in terms of this is how we're going to play, this is how we're going to be. And I also think they heard the backlash from last year from the fans and all of us saying, hey, this is not what an All-Star game should be about.
You know, it's amazing that I'm in this position because yesterday it seemed everyone, and now you're doing echoing it as well, everyone was giving LeBron more credit than I was for setting the tone.
Yeah, you should let us do that. I mean, we'll get there.
Yes, LeBron was part of setting the tone, but I don't think it works if Durant is not on that opening possession out there pressuring Curry 30 feet from the basket. If you don't have, Steph was kind of, humorously eating popcorn on the sideline, but obviously while he was in the game, he was into it. And then you also had the younger guys, Giannis and Embiid, two of the young starters, saying, "Oh, okay, like this could be a star turn for me." Giannis struggled a bit. I thought Embiid did well in it. I thought all the guys embraced the new format, embraced the charity aspect of it, and as you mentioned, they heard the criticism from guys such as yourself and other of the all-time greats.
I think all of us.
Yeah, but I think they care more about when you say it, when guys that were the guys they look up to as basketball stars saying, man, the All-Star game used to mean something. Like, that's what I wanted. What did the All-Star game mean when you were playing it?
Well, we understood the magnitude of the All-Star game in terms of the responsibility that we had as players to move the game forward. I mean, when you are the best players in the game, you have a responsibility generationally. Right? As those of us who have been in the union, we always look at and say, Sarah, what we have to do to make sure that the next generation eats better, lives better, and play better. And for a while, this generation of players, they have forgot their responsibility to the next generation coming forward. Not from a playing standpoint, but just from the All-Star game standpoint. Because they've taken the game to another level. But when they came to All-Star Weekend, they forgot, like, hey, we got sponsors, we got an international audience, this is all showcase, and they forgot to be competitive while they were entertaining.
Right. Now, the NFL, they face some of the same dilemmas as far as the Pro Bowl. Now, I don't believe they'll be able to solve it. For number one is, there is no player in the NFL like LeBron James. And I say that to mean there is no player that can say one thing. Even if Tom Brady, if he was in the Pro Bowl, he couldn't make those guys play. And the influence that LeBron has just on the league, on and off the court, I believe it's a very, very special time, and culminated with how important do you think it was for him to win MVP for his third time?
I think it helped him. I don't think it was important. I thought, just all of the players getting together and just, showing the brotherhood and playing the right way, that was important. But I think for the Pro Bowl, right, if our All-Star game was after the season, right, I don't know if it would be as effective.
Yes.
Because you guys, in football, you do it after the season instead of in season.
Right.
The fact that we do it in season, makes it, everybody can come together and really be a part of it.
Isiah, you mentioned this isn't the new All-Star format. This is how it used to be back in the day when you just go out and pick teams. So there was so much dialogue about should the draft be televised.
Totally.
When do you think they should do it? How should they do it?
I think they should do it, 2 days before.
Friday night, all the guys out there, jerseys on the court, right?
Yeah, and then you can let people get mad because when we picking, right? It's always that one person that be like, "Oh, you ain't gonna pick me."
So
and it's always that one person that's giving you the eye, and you like,
you don't want him guarding you, and you don't want to guard him,
and you don't want him mad at you, right? It's like that one dude that would always show up to the court, right? And you would say, "Who got next?" And you'd be, I got next. And but can I run with you? But you waiting to pick somebody who's still playing, right? And you saying,
all right. So let's go back in time. It's 1990. You're a captain. Michael Jordan's a captain.
Right.
You have the number one pick. And again, we can fudge the years a little bit. But tell me what those teams look like. What
year you say?
I said 1990.
Okay.
You guys had
right.
the year after you guys won your second title, right? That would have been 1990.
Right.
You and Jordan considered the two best players in the league. You guys are the two captains. That way we don't have to worry about one of you guys picking the other one. So just you have the first pick. What are you doing?
I got Magic.
You got Magic.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea who Michael goes with?
He'd probably take Pippen.
Pippen, he just got there.
Yeah,
there you go. Who's your first big man off the board?
Probably Lambeer.
Lambeer? Hold on. You can't take Lambeer first, man.
Dude, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I'm taking my teammates. They would understand Magic being the first pick.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I'm taking Rodman, I'm taking Lambeer, I'm taking all the Pistons.
They didn't get named.
And we're playing against everybody, right?
So you don't,
I like it.
You don't care about any of the guys' feeling. You're going to pick the best team for you to hoop that day.
That day, and then when I have to go back to the locker room.
Yeah.
Yes,
He does care.
Yes, I got to go back to the locker room.
Akeem Olajuwon is sitting right there. Patrick Ewing is sitting right there.
Dude,
David Robinson.
Dude, I love you. And to this day, right? Mm-hmm. I'm with Lambeer over David Robinson. I'm with Lambeer over Patrick Ewing. I'm with Lambeer over Olajuwon. I'm with Lambeer. I'm with Lambeer over Abdul-Jabbar.
All right, well, I mean,
You got rings to back.
Yeah. And by the way, he didn't foul Kareem on that last play.
That's the second time really brought this up. The finals. Oh God.
I'm riding with the people who are in the car with me.
Okay.
It's us against the world. You ain't seen that T-shirt, Detroit against everybody?
Yeah.
That's us.
Yeah, Detroit's been taking those losses, though. You're trying to help them out, but it's fine.
Yeah, now, last question, and I know it's important to you because the impact that you made on me as a 14-year-old when I first met you. The saying that we as athletes are just athletes. Where does that stand with you, who I saw you as an athlete do things for me as a kid who I didn't have no promise. You had just met me. But the impact that you've made on young people traveling around the world playing basketball, where does that sit with you, just being just an athlete?
Well, first of all, you have to see past our jersey. We're not just an athlete, right? We're citizens, right? We live in this country. And by the way, when they say education is about participation and observation, so when you're talking about race and politics in this country, right, in sport, and by the way, I'm studied.
Yeah.
Right? I got my master's.
Yeah.
In this conversation here that we're talking about in race, sports, and cultural studies, when you're talking about participation and observation, LeBron James has participated in sport. He's participated as a citizen. So therefore, he has the right to critique what's happening in this country from an observation standpoint. So his observation as a sports person, as a citizen, and also as a participant in society where we're talking about race, okay, there is no more of an authority figure to talk about these things than him. So athletes have always had the benefit in the platform to talk about race, society, and politics because of their unique personal experience of observation and participation. So they are the experts, and that's why they come to sport to always have the hard conversations around race, gender, class, and politics. They have it here in sport, and then sport reflects and tells society how to act.
I'm Jenna Wolf, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long.